to my long-standing subscribers, thank you so much for staying tuned, for supporting me, for watching these videos. To all my new subscribers, I see you. Thank you so much for subscribing. This is really just a passion project of mine, and I'm hoping that you're enjoying what you see. So from decades before I was born, debate has been raging in Jamaica about our native language, Jamaican Patois, or Jamaican Creole. Growing up, I'd always heard that it wasn't a language, but a dialect. However, I don't think a lot of us have ever really stopped to think about what we mean when we say these words. That is, what is a language and what is a dialect? The Oxford English Dictionary defines language as the principal method of human communication consisting of words used in a structured and conventional way and conveyed by speech, writing, or gesture, with gesture here likely referring to signed languages. And the OED also defines language as a system of communication used by a particular country or community. So a language is structured words used for communication. Structured, meaning languages have grammar. The OED defines dialect as a particular form of a language which is peculiar to a specific region or social group. That is, a dialect is a variety of a language spoken in a certain area of the world, in a certain part of a country, or by certain social groups within a society. Now, there's one very important thing to remember about dictionaries. This is something that I think a lot of us forget, and it is that dictionaries are a record. They are records of how words are used in a language and what the speakers of those languages mean when they say those words. That is, dictionaries are not here to tell us what to say. Instead, they record how speakers use certain words, what they mean when they say them, and what kind of sentences or phrases they're used in. So we, the speakers of a language, determine what actually goes into a dictionary. Dictionaries are compiled by persons called lexicographers. Lexicography is the study of words, their meanings and usage, and the compilation, putting those words together into dictionaries. Linguistics is the study of languages, language in general, and language production. Linguistics is the scientific study of language. So linguists put languages under a microscope. And no, not the people who speak many languages. Those are polyglots. Linguists conduct research on language for a living. They document languages that are dying. They study vocabulary, grammar, accents, language and the brain, language and society, language and culture. They trace the history of a language. They study language change. They're the ones that governments go to when they want to make a local language an official language. And many linguists also double as language activists. Many are active in language revitalization efforts. They speak out against linguistic discrimination, and they help to educate wider audiences. So going back to the language dialect discussion, in linguistics, a dialect is a variety of a language. And one very important thing to remember about these language varieties is that they have what is called mutual intelligibility, meaning speakers of the same language, speaking different dialects around the world or even within the same country, can fully or almost fully understand each other. Minus the slangs or maybe informal structures, the core grammar, vocabulary, and their meanings are the same. Dialects share the same grammar as their parent language. And in linguistics, grammar can be broken down into about 5 basic parts. The words of the language, or the lexicon, the meanings of the words, semantics, the structure of phrases and sentences, syntax, word internal structure, morphology, and the sounds of the language and patterns of pronunciation, phonology. And all this gets real interesting when we start to look at signed and whistled languages. Now, when the average everyday Jane Smith says vocabulary, she's usually thinking about lexicon and semantics, the words and their meanings. When she says grammar, she's usually thinking about syntax and morphology. And when she says accent, she's usually referencing phonology. Grammar means rules. And when you follow the rules of a particular language, then what you produce or what you say will be grammatical. Conversely, if you break those rules, then what you have is something that is ungrammatical. So in English, I can say I watched the TV, but not I washed the TV. unless I'm actually watching a TV, in which case, carry on. But in the case of the latter, I've chosen the wrong word. Lexicon is incorrect. And there's actually something very interesting happening in this sentence. This example is actually a triple whammy because in English, the ch and sh sounds are two completely different sounds phonologically. When it comes to the phonology of English, the sound system, the sounds of the language, the patterns of pronunciation for English, ch and sh are different sounds. And so if we switch these sounds around, they signal a change in words in the lexicon, which then signals a change in meaning in the semantics. Now, taking this all the way back, growing up, I'd always heard that it wasn't a language, but a dialect. When it comes to our Jamaican language, I used to hear people say, and probably people still say the same thing, of we can just say anything anyhow and it would make sense. If this were actually true, then all of these Jamaican language examples that we hear in these movies, in these TV shows on
Call me
TV,
now for your free
wouldn't irk us as much because we can say anything anyhow and it would make sense, right? The fact that these phrases, these sentences, these examples of these Jamaicans and Jamaicans irk us, it tells us that there's something off about what they're doing. If it's the pronunciation, then their phonology is off. If it's the word that they use, then their lexicon is off. If that's not how we would say it, maybe the syntax is off, or the morphology, or even the semantics, the meaning would be different in our Jamaican language. And let me give you a very simple example of how there is a very specific order to how we say things in our Jamaican language in order for them to make sense. Here's a sentence: Mnyamit. I ate it. Mnyamit or Medidnyamit. So I speak the Kingston variety of our Jamaican language, and so I use did, Medidnyamit. If I want to say I am eating it, I would say mi a nyamit. So I would switch did with a. And if I wanted to make it a past continuous action, I'd put did, then a, midida nyamit. And there is a very strict syntactic order to these words. Change them around and it becomes a garbled mess. Also, just like Japanese, we have dialects of our Jamaican language that exist within Jamaica as well. And we can see that in our past tense marker. Depending on where you are, what region of Jamaica you are from, you would use a different past tense marker. English and our Jamaican language do not share the same grammar. And where persons sometimes get confused is because of some of these words sounding like English, which absolutely makes sense. Back on the plantation, when our ancestors were unintentionally crafting this beautiful language, their main input was English. But the structure and the pronunciation were their own. Combining these together, the words from English with the grammar and accent of their own languages, they created a new language that was neither English nor their native languages. They created our Jamaican language. And linguists have been publishing information on this for decades, from as far back as the 1960s. And the reason we don't hear a lot of this information and the reason we don't see a lot of this being disseminated, being spread as widely as it should, is because in Jamaica, these discussions are never just about our language. This is also about value, prestige, class, and quite frankly, politics. 2 children on national television in Jamaica saying the exact same thing. But one child is speaking in English and one child is speaking in our Jamaican language. The child speaking English will be considered to be bright, intelligent, chat good. And the child speaking in our Jamaican language will be dunce, stupid, and chat bad. The content doesn't matter. The language choice does. In our country, English is the language of the rich, the upwardly mobile, the educated. And patois is the language of the masses, of the poor. Most persons in Jamaica use the word language to talk about an established way of speaking. You go to school to learn a language. You can speak a language internationally. It's a respectable form of communication. And a dialect isn't an established way of speaking. You don't go to school to learn a dialect. You can't speak a dialect internationally, like for business or trade or politics. A dialect is a bastardized version of an actual language, a perversion of a proper language, if you will. I always maintain that I'm bilingual. I speak both English and our Jamaican language. And like every bilingual and multilingual person out there in the world, I choose which language to use based on my audience. Every single human being is capable of mastering more than one language, but speaking just one isn't a bad thing. Like the Italians and the Japanese, there's nothing wrong with owning your native language. So, no, our Jamaican language is not a dialect. It's actually a language in its own right. And to those of us beating the what about when you go abroad and you have to chat English, Patronaga come nowhere close to scrubbing out English. And a lot of the discussions around this are also centered on fears from discrimination that we experience outside Jamaica and also the discrimination that we dish out within Jamaica. Just some food for thought. Thanks for listening today. I hope you learned something interesting. Subscribe to my channel, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.